Welcome to American Civil War Today. I'm Charles Cummings. Our guest on today's show is Dr. Max Terman. He is a professor, a former professor at Tabor College in Kansas, and he has written 3 books. 2 of them, by correctness, were focused on science. One is Earth-Sheltered Housing Principles and Practice, and the second was Messages from an Owl. However, his 3rd book, Hiram's Honor, is about the American Civil War. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Terman.
Well, thank you, Charles.
Can you talk a little bit about...
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, great. Can you talk a little bit about going from being a scientist to writing a novel on the American Civil War? Obviously, those are very different fields.
Well, yes, I can. I had written a popularized account of my research on the great horned owl, the book you mentioned from Princeton University Press. It was entitled Messages from an Owl. And I had a lot of feedback from my editors and readers, and they thought that it read very much like a novel, and that if I ever found a topic that I'd like to write a novel on, I should use that same style. And so when I came across my ancestor, who had fought in the American Civil War and had quite a story, that became the topic of my novel.
Okay. The book is called Hiram's Honor, Reliving Private Terman's Civil War. Just a couple of questions here. What does it mean, Hiram's Honor? Who is that? And I assume Private Terman was a historical person, your ancestor.
Yes, he was a Civil War soldier, and he was in the 82nd Ohio Infantry, Company F, and he was captured at Gettysburg and then survived 17 months as a prisoner of war, including a stay at the infamous Andersonville. And that was one of the worst of the Civil War prisons. And when I learned about this story and the incredible survival aspect of it, that's what really led me in to try to write it as a novel. I thought that if I wrote just a documentary or just gave the facts and so forth, it really wouldn't be true to the human emotion and human drama that I discovered in his story. In fact, right now, I'm working from his Civil War pension files, and I'm working on a sequel to Hiram's Honor. And the title Hiram's Honor comes from what I believe my ancestor realized what was truly honorable in life, and that is to keep your humanity in the most dire circumstances, and that would be when your own survival is at risk.
So was Hiram a person, or does it have a particular meaning during the time?
Hiram was a real person. His name was Hiram Terman, and he was a private from the day he enrolled or enlisted in December 26, 1861, and persevered for 3 years. And most of that time in very dire circumstances, where he was right on the edge of survival. And his story of how he survived was the thing that actually grabbed me for this novel.
Oh, well, okay, so that's his first name. It's not a very common name these days. Yeah, I don't know if you know which country they came from or where that name originated from. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very common name back in the Civil War times. I came across a number of other Hirams, even some of them that I think were politicians or even generals. And a lot of the names from the Civil War are fairly unique. In fact, that was one of the challenges of writing the book, was to come up with names that fit the times. And one thing I learned, that if you write a Civil War book, you better have all your facts right.
Oh yes, that is true. All right, well let's talk a little bit about the book. Can you kind of maybe just give us a general overview, and then perhaps tell us a couple of the more interesting stories within the book?
Okay. The book is about his Civil War experiences, that is Private Hiram Terman's Civil War experiences, and he fought in many of the major battles, Second Bull Run, Chancellorsville, and then made it up to Gettysburg, and there he was captured, and then sent down to Stanton, Virginia, with Lee's retreating army, and that in itself is a miserable experience. And then from Stanton, then he was shipped to Richmond, and at Richmond in the James River, there was a prison camp there called Belle Island, and he spent from July through February at Belle Island, and in February was one of the worst winters ever. And if you could imagine the survival that would have taken to be in almost with no clothing, very crude shelter, very limited diet. He survived Belle Island, hoping to get exchanged, and of course at that time the exchange was taken out of practice because the Confederates would not exchange soldiers for black soldiers that were enrolled at that time by the Union. And so the exchange went out just at the time when he needed it.
Yeah.
What's that?
I was saying, so he just missed being exchanged because a lot of them were exchanged for the first couple of years of the war. Like when Stonewall Jackson captured 12,000 Union troops at Harper's Ferry, the Union troops immediately marched north. They didn't go south at all. So like Gettysburg, that situation had changed quite a lot.
That's right. He had just had that unfortunate timing that he was captured just at the time when the parole system was being abandoned, and it was going into the worst of circumstances because the Confederacy could hardly feed its own soldiers, let alone the masses of prisoners that they started taking in. Well, and then he threw a lot of good fortune and so forth, survived Andersonville, and then he eventually made it back to Annapolis. He was paroled at Savannah just when Sherman's army was coming through. He made it back to Annapolis to Camp Parole, and from there made it back to Mansfield, Ohio, which is where I'm from also. And so he actually made it back right around Christmas time or a little bit later in January. And so the book is about those events. And then superimposed on those events, I put in a lot of the human emotion that came through letters, firsthand accounts, diaries that came from his regiment. And I didn't find anything actually from him until I got into his pension files, and then I found a couple letters from him. But the book is really about human nature, friendship, morality, and during the Civil War, religious faith was very important. And the exchange that he had with two of his friends about religious issues in the context of the Civil War, a lot of those things make up the book.
So, how do you describe the book? Obviously, it's based on history and one of your ancestors, but I assume like the dialogue is basically fiction. That's right?
Yeah, it's fiction in that I made it up, but it's factual in that it's based on the topics and issues that were in the Civil War letters. I was fortunate enough in Ohio to come across Richard Fink, who is an expert on the 82nd Ohio and has numerous files from soldiers that were in that regiment, actual letters, newspaper accounts, and so forth. And one thing I noticed in going through all those letters that the issues of fighting and killing, dying, succession, the military leadership, slavery, abolition, politics, science, human nature, all of those things kind of came to the surface in those letters. And so those were the things that I worked into their dialogue. And one of the things that I did was to cast one of his friends as a very secular person with a college background, and the other friend was a very religious person who came from a very conservative religious background. And then Hiram was right in the middle of these two as they go through these events of the Civil War.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So you said Hiram was he was paroled when Sherman was coming through, which is also interesting. So he was actually paroled, I guess, relatively a few months before the war ended. Is that right?
Yeah. He actually was at Andersonville in September 1864. And, of course, up to that time, every little rumor that went through camp was about being exchanged. And there was another rumor that came through about being exchanged. But this time, the rumor was accompanied by one of the guards saying that Atlanta had fallen. And that then really brought about a serious consideration with the troops there that were prisoners, Union prisoners. And they knew that, with Sherman being close because of all the prisoners that were coming in from the Union Army with his march through Georgia, they knew that this was it. And so the way that I understood what happened to Hiram was that he and two of his friends were actually taken out, and one of his friends got sick and was left behind, and that was a major challenge for Hiram to handle that, how to leave a friend behind because he couldn't walk, and the only ones that were being taken out were those that were mobile and could walk. And the Confederates knew that Sherman was close, and they certainly didn't want to have all those prisoners in the shape that they were, being discovered by his army. They thought that would be a very bad situation. And so they actually moved Hiram and thousands of prisoners to another camp in Millen, Georgia, called Camp Lawton. And there in Camp Lawton, then he stayed another month until about the middle of November. And then from there, then he was taken to Savannah, and from Savannah then was put on a Union ship, and then was taken to Annapolis. And they were mere walking skeletons at that time, barely alive, so to speak.
Yeah.
That was a real challenge to capture that emotion.
And Dr. Terman, what is really the most unique aspect of the book?
Well, as you know, there are many, many books on the Civil War, and in thinking about how to make this unique, I decided that I would step into my ancestors' shoes, that I would become Private Hiram Terman, and therefore I wrote this book from the first person as if I was experiencing those things, and that allowed me to bring in a lot of the human drama because I myself was reacting to the things that he was reacting to. So I would think that would be probably one of the more unique things. I haven't seen a book like that.
So if someone wants to read about the American Civil War from really one person's perspective, sort of step by step, and be there with what they're going into the battle, and then they're captured, and they're all basically living that moment by moment, that's the book really brings that out.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the reviewers have constantly said is that it actually puts you in the shoes of a Civil War soldier in the major battles, in the prison camps. And the other thing that has happened is that online colleges has named the book as one of the top 25 for studying the Civil War from the perspective of the common soldier.
Right. Wow. That's great. That's really interesting. All right. This might be a little bit beyond the scope of this book, but what happened to Private Terman after the Civil War?
Yeah, that's where the sequel comes in.
Oh, so maybe you don't want to tell us
Hiram's
too much.
Hope.
Hiram's Hope. Okay.
Well, I have just written the first 4 chapters of that, and so I'm just getting a feel for it. But The thing that happens to him is, and I think this is the way it is with a lot of people who come back from their horrendous experience of war, let alone being a prisoner of war and starved for 17 months. His challenge was to come back and to live a life that he would interact with his neighbors, that he could interact with his community, perhaps get married. And so that challenge of coming back from the depths, so to speak, that the Civil War put him in, that would be the challenge, and that would be the theme of the sequel, Hiram's Hope.
Okay. Well, in the future, when your next book is published, we'd love to have you back on the show here. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm kind of shooting for next spring or summer to have that done.
Okay, so spring or summer of 2013.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, if you're listening and you are interested in buying this book, Hiram's Honor, Reliving Private Terman Civil War, you can buy it on Amazon. I'll also put links to Dr. Terman's blog and, of course, the American Civil War Today website in the description. However you're listening to this, whether it be on iTunes or on YouTube or in the website. And just want to say thanks again for coming on the show, and we look forward to having you back on the show next year.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.